The following podcast is entirely a work of fan fiction. It is unofficial, unaffiliated, and unauthorized. Neither the podcast nor any individual involved in its production is now, nor has ever been, in any way associated with HBO, Game of Thrones, George R.R. Martin, or the Song of Ice and Fire book series. The podcast was, is now, and shall always be entirely without profit. Neither the podcast directly, nor its makers indirectly, generate or receive any form of revenue or financial restitution that might otherwise accrue to the rightful copyright holders. The following podcast is entirely a work of fan fiction. We hope you enjoy it.
Standing at the end of the dock, arms crossed and tucked inside the pendulous sleeves of his luxurious robes, Varys smiles up at the enormous merchant ship, flying Pentoshi colours, drawing alongside. A cadre of customs agents pushes brusquely by in its haste to descend upon the new arrival. The Master of Whispers watches as the gangplank is lowered, and Illyrio Mopatis ambles his prodigious girth down the wooden decline and onto the dock, handing over his papers at the lead agent's command. The Magister opens his arms wide and greets Varys with a hearty embrace.
Has it really been 9 months since you left me in Pentos?
8, in fact.
I offered you 12.
And I only needed 6.
4, 6, 8 or 12. Any time at all in this malodorous dung heap of a city must pass as slow as a lifetime sentence.
I've actually grown rather fond of my new home. Its charms are discreet, I grant you, but they are many if you know where to find them. Come, your carriage awaits. Aegon the Conqueror was no fool when he built his fort. You'll find the air much sweeter atop the high hill.
Of that I have little doubt, but I've set my heart on far humbler board. Never forget, old friend, no matter how high you rise in the world, it always pays to keep one foot firmly in the gutter.
The Magister turns to inspect the progress of his attendants in unloading his cargo. Satisfied, he takes Varys's arm in his own, and the pair stroll in step towards the Mudgate and the bustling city waiting beyond. Varys and Illyrio stand before the last door on a dilapidated terrace. Hands on haunches, Illyrio leans back and admires with proud appraisal the weather-worn signage mounted below the wraparound windows of the first floor. The paint is so faded that a passing pedestrian may well require a second glance to distinguish the design from the dull mud colouring of the edifice itself. An unimpressed Varys furrows his brow.
It looks more like a merman to me.
Hush your tone, my good fellow, for we are in the presence of legend. The Mermaid was once the finest pleasure house in all the world, catering only to the most refined of perversions.
Illyrio's rhapsodies are interrupted by a noble-kneed old man staggering at pace through the Mermaid's doors, wearing a battered steel chestplate on his top half and nothing at all on his bottom.
It seems to attract a rather lower class of pervert these days.
The first of many changes we shall have to make if we mean to restore the old girl to her former glory.
Varys's mouth gawps like a landed fish, confounded at his friend's intentions, but Illyrio has already left him behind. Navigating a wide path around the now prostrate patron, the Magister marches through the door with undiminished purpose. With a defeated sigh, Varys follows in his wake. Within, they find a squalid sight. Though the ornate fixtures and finely moulded fittings of years past remain, today their detail is disguised beneath layers of dust and grease and grime. The paintwork is peeling, the draperies damp and mildewed, the exposed wooden flooring buckled and stained. A score of drunken and dishevelled men lounge about the open foyer, ogling with idle lust a coterie of gaudily dressed and garishly made-up women, touting fruitlessly for custom. A pair of topless working girls, their aged breasts sagging and deflated, trudge resignedly up the winding staircase that connects the 2 floors. 3 gold cloaks, barely sober enough to stand, stumbling haphazardly behind. They pass a diminutive, ferret-faced man, descending in hurried steps. A quick once-over of his new custom transforms his ingratiating smile into a wolfish leer as he catches sight of the thick bands of bejewelled gold wrapped around Illyrio's fat fingers.
My lords, welcome to our humble establishment. How may Ardrew be of service?
In the time it takes Varys to puzzle out that Ardrew is a man given to referring to himself in the first person, the Panderer has snapped his fingers and summoned a trio of women from across the room. The first drapes herself upon Illyrio's arm, while the second and third circle Varys, running their hands over his body and the smooth, powdered dome of his hairless head. Varys shoos them away, but his admirers remain undeterred, prompting the Master of Whispers to draw himself protectively into the voluminous folds of his robe, like a retreating turtle.
Don't put yourself to any trouble, my good man. We can find our own quarters, thank you.
Without a backward glance, Illyrio drifts across the foyer and starts up the stairs at a pace of gait and lightness of step that belies his gargantuan heft.
There must be some misunderstanding, my lord. We do have rooms available, but we only rent by the hour, if you take my meaning.
Varys gratefully frees himself from his admirer's affections and hurries after the Magister, the befuddled Ardrew scurrying to overtake him and catch Illyrio as he reaches the mezzanine.
Apologies, my lord, but if you would only allow me to escort you back to the foyer, I'd be glad to point you towards...
What do we have here?
Illyrio flings open the first door he reaches, disturbing a scene of rhythmically uninspired carnality unfolding within. With a quick wave of apology, Illyrio closes the door and moves on to the next.
My lord, please.
Finding Illyrio persistently unresponsive, Ardrew turns his appeals towards Varys.
Please, my lord, this simply won't do. Our business depends upon discretion.
Varys has made the error of laying a hand upon the banister. When he raises it again, he finds his palm wet and sticky.
I, for one, shall never breathe a word of my being here.
Skipping a few doors down the line, the Magister exclaims in delight at his discovery.
Ah, here we are. These shall serve quite well, I believe. Quite well indeed.
Although the fittings and fixtures suffer beneath the same lacquer of neglect as all the rest, this room at least is well cleaned and handsomely furnished. By the long latticed windows, varnished floorboards, and plump leather furniture, it's almost possible to envision the room as it was when the High Lords of Westeros last indulged their most wanton proclivities beneath the exposed timbers of its high-vaulted ceiling.
Forgive me, my lord, but these are my own personal quarters.
Ah, yes, I suspected as much. If you leave a forwarding address with my servants, I'll see that your belongings are sent along after you.
Ardrew's face darkens, his indignation stymied only by his stammering tongue.
I'm not sure what game you're playing here, but I really have reached the end of my patience.
And of your employment, if that weren't already plain.
Do you know who I am? I am the son of the late Lord Symond Staunton, Master of Laws.
Bastard son. So let's dispense with the airs and graces, shall we?
Surprised at this stranger's familiarity with his family history, Ardrew is ready to riposte when an enormous Pentoshi manservant fills the doorway, a heavy wooden crate in his arms.
Just set it down anywhere, Jodo. We'll sort through them all once I'm settled in.
Ardrew gapes at Illyrio, caught between the competing impulses to remonstrate with this intruder's presumption, or flee from his evident madness.
Settled in? I don't know who you think you are, or what you think you know about me, but I'm quite sure it's past time you and your...
Not that one, Gillis. That one's for our friend here.
Gillis redirects his steps and deposits a squat wooden chest on the table before the befuddled Ardrew. Ardrew's eyes flare with greed at the trove of silver and gold coins filling the crate almost to the brim.
Now, Listen closely, dear fellow. This here is the price your father and I agreed for these premises before his untimely passing.
It's not his to sell anymore. My father left everything to me when he died.
Including all his debts, I'm given to understand. Awful thing, gambling. Some say it's a sign of spiritual weakness. I say it's a sign of rank stupidity. The question now is whether the son means to hold to his father's word, or continue in his father's folly.
Ardrew considers a moment, then snatches up the chest and turns to depart. He pauses on the threshold, struck by inspiration.
The girls will cost you extra.
That won't be necessary, thank you.
Jodo returns. Illyrio raises an eyebrow in question, and Jodo nods, much to the Magister's delight.
Marvellous.
He bustles past Ardrew and onto the mezzanine.
You can't run a brothel without girls.
I mean to run a pillow house, not a brothel.
What's the difference?
As though in answer, Illyrio rests his hands atop the balustrade and watches with satisfaction as a dozen young women file into the lobby below. The patrons and working girls alike stand stricken at the splendid flock suddenly in their midst, their plumage made of the finest silks and sheerest lace. The women draw back their veils to reveal a gallery of unnatural beauty, each face more arresting in the ethereal delicacy of its contours than the last. Above, Illyrio waves a hand in dismissal at the captivated Ardrew.
Off you trot, there's a good man.
Woken from his entrancement, Ardrew takes no second telling and scuttles down the stairs, clutching his chest of coins as though afraid Illyrio may change his mind if he lingers another minute. Picking an errant cup from a nearby table, Illyrio sniffs its contents, takes the smallest of sips, then immediately spits it back into the cup. He addresses the crowd below, though only half their number manage to tear their eyes away from the mermaid's new roster.
Gentlemen, this establishment shall be shuttering its doors at the close of business today for some much-needed refurbishments. I would be most grateful if you could all save me the trouble of hauling barrels to the nearest gutter by drinking our stores dry before nightfall. In return, everyone drinks for free. Gillis, be a good man and go salvage a barrel or two of that swill before they're all gone. We shall need something to strip this hideous green paint from the walls.
Returning to his new chambers, Illyrio crosses to the windows and opens a pane to admit the outside air. The chair set behind the broad mahogany desk complains disconcertingly as it receives the Magister's girth. The Master of Whispers studies his old friend, waiting for some word of explanation. Instead, Illyrio only smiles broadly and leans back to assume a more comfortable repose.
So, where shall we begin?
Aerys bolts upright in his chair, suddenly awoken from a restless slumber of fire and blood.
Damned white cloaks. How many times must I tell you I'm not to be disturbed?
A Lord Varys to see you, your grace.
1,000 apologies, your grace, but I was given instruction to present myself as soon as I arrived.
Yes, in you come.
Aerys closes the door on Jonothor, leaving him with an ill-tempered scowl to let the Kingsguard know his transgression has not been forgiven, however justified its reason.
If now is a bad time, Your Grace, I can always come back at a more convenient hour.
Sit!
Aerys points Varys to an empty chair across the hearth and slumps wearily back into his own.
I trust your passage was uneventful?
Thankfully so, Your Grace. We did suffer a day or two of rough seas, but...
And your accommodations are to your liking?
Varys, ever the fast learner, understands this is not a conversation, and a thorough reply neither expected nor appreciated.
Very much so, Your Grace. Thank you.
The next council meeting is scheduled for the day after tomorrow. You'll find yourself outnumbered by Tywin's lickspittles. I have sent for reinforcements, but it seems my son intends to complete his current gallivant before complying with my summons.
I'm certain I shall survive until then, Your Grace.
You wouldn't be so certain if you knew the loathsome curs with whom you'll share the council table. Tywin's creatures, every one of them, and each more grasping and perfidious than the last. The 4 claws of the lion's paw, I call them.
In a cramped and sparsely dressed chamber adjoining the officers of the King's Hand, the small council sits in awkward silence, awaiting Lord Tywin's presence.
How are you adjusting to life in the capital, Lord? Do you know, I'm not quite clear. Is Varys your given name or your family name?
Grandmaester Pycelle has been at court since my grandfather sat the Iron Throne, despite never once demonstrating any discernible purpose. He has a preternatural instinct for self-preservation, always wheedling his way into the favour of powerful men and clinging on like a limpet to a rock.
Simply Varys will suffice if it please you, my lord. And thus far, I've found King's Landing most amenable. Thank you. Though I'm sure I shall appreciate your country even more once this awful winter has passed.
From your lips to the gods' ears, let us hope.
Lucerys Velaryon, master of ships. The bastard-born dregs of a once great house, reduced to plundering trading routes across the narrow sea until Tywin took an interest. Now he commands the royal fleet, though his patron hasn't permitted him to hoist an actual sail in years.
One must expect a period of adjustment to new surroundings, particularly coming all the way from...
Pycelle lets the invitation hang tantalizingly in the air, but the eunuch refuses to bite.
Where was it you said you're from?
Oh, I've called many places home over the years, but I'm loath to name any one above the others.
Even flotsam carried on the evening tide has its provenance, my lord. Your people must come from somewhere.
Qarlton Chelsted, master of coin. His own father disowned him in his youth for some untold transgressions. Gods only know how he was earning his coppers when Tywin found him and raised him back up to a lordship. Though I've heard whispers it makes Velaryon's pirate days seem positively wholesome by comparison.
Most people do, in my experience, Lord Chelsted, though I prefer to present myself as something of a blank slate, as it were. I find men have an unfortunate tendency to place entirely too much stock in one's provenance.
Not a sentiment you will hear voiced with any regularity among the lords and ladies of court, I suspect. Except, perhaps, from our master of ships.
Symond Staunton, master of laws. The one true noble among the lot. He even boasts a brother of the King's Guard in his line, which I've no doubt he'll be certain to tell you. Noble by birth, perhaps, but not by nature. He and his gold cloaks have fingers in 100 pies all across the city, and he owes it all to Tywin's good favour. The others will strive to outdo one another in their sycophancy, but Staunton would hollow out his own mother's skull if Tywin needed a convenient receptacle in which to shit. He's missed as many councils as he's attended of late, claiming a touch of winter fever.
I've always held the belief that what matters most is where a man is going, not where he has come from. A man should not be expected to carry his pedigree on display, like a peacock does its feathers.
How else are we to know it truly is a peacock, and not some beggar bird wearing the raiment of its betters?
The muscles in Lucerys's jaws flex as he grinds his teeth.
I'm not sure I like your meaning, Staunton.
I was speaking no offence, my lord, only of the tendency for reputations to endure beyond their proper applications. Take our dear Master of Coin, for example. The sigil of House Chelsted is a mason dagger, is it not?
A rich pink blush colours Qarlton Chelsted's cheek at the mere mention of his lineage.
Over per bend green and white, yes, what of it?
Only that, at some point in the history of House Chelsted, your name was associated more with the tools of hedge knights and cutthroats than those of civil bureaucracy. Or perhaps I'm mistaken, and what I've always taken for a dagger and mace are actually a letter opener and an especially grisly-looking paperweight.
Much can change over the centuries. You cannot judge a man by the manner of his forebears' ascent.
Nor our forebears by the manner of their descendants' fall.
Varys watches with keen interest as Qarlton shoots daggers at the smirking Symond.
And what, might I ask, decorates your own banners, Lord Varys?
As much as it pains me to admit, Grandmaester, I have none. I wonder if I shouldn't design my own, observe the customs of my new countrymen, as it were. A pointer finger pressed to a pair of sealed lips, perhaps. Just as other houses adopt a dagger and a mace as a warning to their enemies, it would remind mine own that secrets can be every bit as deadly as conventional weaponry when wielded by a master.
Pycelle gives an unimpressed snort and casts his eyes about the table in invitation for others to share in his derision.
Forgive me, I seem to have missed the joke, Grandmaester.
Varys trails off, his brow furrowed.
Do you know, I just realised I'm not entirely certain if Pycelle is your given name or your family name.
I don't know how they do things where you come from, wherever that may be, but here in Westeros, a man sets aside both his name and his house when he first dons his Maester's chain. It's a common practice among many such venerable institutions here in the Seven Kingdoms.
Is that so? Well, it seems, Lord Staunton, that you've rather overstated your case.
How so?
Contrary to your holding, it appears in the Seven Kingdoms a man need not be burdened by the inheritance of his house after all. He need only make himself a maester, and his past just melts away forever like a snowflake come the spring.
Symond joins Pycelle in harumphing his displeasure, but Lucerys and Qarlton each look at Varys as though weighing him anew. Refusing to concede the field, Symond turns to address the only man yet to contribute.
And what say you, Lord Commander Hightower? How else might we best judge a man's worth if not by the measure of his breeding?
Varys peers anxiously at the armed and armoured knight looming just over his shoulder, in but not of the politics of table.
The White Bull, they call him. Though looking at him today, you'd be forgiven for wondering why. When Ormond Baratheon fell on the stepstones, my father gave command of his forces to Hightower, and not a single voice was raised in opposition. But that was 20 years ago. He's an old man now, and wields his honour like a shield to deflect any effort at provoking an opinion from him. He sees his presence in council as merely ceremonial. I say it's entirely ornamental.
Hightower shifts his weight like a statue suddenly conjured to life.
I believe a man should be judged on his words and how closely they align with his actions. Everything else is little more than noise and bluster and bolts of coloured cloth.
Varys considers the White Bull closely, somewhat taken aback at the sudden intrusion of plain and earnest speaking.
A noble sentiment indeed, sir.
Hightower returns Varys's appreciation with a curt nod of acknowledgement.
Velaryon, Chelsted, Staunton, Pycelle. Everything they have they owe to Tywin's patronage. Compelling them to break that faith will be no easy task, I warn you now. I don't care who you start with or how you go about it, but those 4 wretches are the means by which we'll cut Tywin's legs out from under him and send him toppling back down into his fit and proper place.
The small council rises as one at the entrance of Lord Tywin Lannister, Hand of the King. He brushes a dusting of snow from the shoulders of his crimson doublet and casts his gold-green eyes over his councillors.
Lord Varys, I see you've wasted no time making new acquaintances.
Oh yes, everyone has been most welcoming, my Lord Hand.
Marvellous. Then we shall forego the formal introductions and proceed to the day's agenda.
Tywin assumes his place at the head of the table, and the council take their chairs.
Lord Staunton, perhaps you'd care to explain why I have a letter on my desk from Lord Roseby inquiring if His Grace has remitted the Crownland taxes permanently or only temporarily.
A veiled slight against Lord Roseby's closest neighbour, I fear. It would appear Duskendale has entered into modest arrears in its dues to the Crown.
Have we brought these arrears to Lord Darklin's attention?
We have, my Lord Hand. Lord Staunton sent a raven to the Dunfort several days ago, at my instruction.
Qarlton smiles to himself as Symond squirms beneath Tywin's baleful glare.
You are Master of Laws, are you not?
By your good grace, my Lord Hand.
Then perhaps you ought to send a second raven, reminding Lord Darklin of the law regarding full and prompt payment of taxes due.
At once, my Lord Hand.
I am not so petty as to deny the finer qualities of a man's character. Tywin Lannister is an able servant, possessed of a keener mind for the tedium of governments than any bureaucrat in recent memory. He has performed in his role as Hand of the King with greater competency than any man might reasonably have hoped. I afford myself no little credit for persevering in my stewardship of his career at court when all around me were counselling the contrary.
Aerys throws back his cup and drains his first pour. He looks to the window with a contemplative frown.
Perhaps that's it. Perhaps I'm to blame for not listening when they told me how proud he was, how ambitious. I saw the bitterness, the envy, the cold-hearted calculation always weighing everyone up behind those beady little eyes like piss-holes in the snow. But a man like that, I thought, a man so ruthless, so full of deceit and low cunning, that's the sort of man you'll need beside you to restore the Iron Throne to its former strength. And so I chose to excuse that pride, overlook that ambition. By the time he presumed to offer his daughter for my son and heir, I could no longer deny the ugly truth, no matter how generous and magnanimous my nature.
If I may, Your Grace, why now? What has changed to make you so eager to clip Lord Tywin's wings after all these years?
Aerys considers Varys for a moment.
Do you dream, Varys?
No more than any other man, Your Grace.
Then you should count yourself fortunate.
Varys holds his tongue, expecting the king to continue. Instead, Aerys merely sighs and waves a hand in dismissal.
That will be all for this evening. On your way out, tell Sir Jonothor I wish to speak with him.
Varys stands before Illyrio's desk. The Magister leaned back in his chair, listening to his friend's recounting.
Now would be the time I surprise you with the news that Symond Staunton is recently deceased. But I gathered from that business with his bastard that you somehow know that already. But what you cannot know, lost in transit these past weeks as you were, is that his replacement is also dead. Steffon Baratheon's passage across the narrow sea proving rather less successful than your own.
Well now, that is an unexpected turn. I confess my suspicions were aroused when I learned of Staunton's passing. But now I hear the king hand-picked his successor. Those same suspicions are positively tumescent. No doubt Tywin has cast similar aspersions.
Surprisingly not. As far as I am aware, Tywin blames naught but winter fever for Lord Staunton's passing.
Is that a fact? The king must be flattered that Tywin still bears him such regard.
He's offended that Tywin bears him so little, actually. The fact that Tywin immediately dismissed any notion of Aerys acting against him spoke volumes as to just how impotent Tywin believes him to be.
And not without good cause, no? Surely you have asked yourself why the most powerful man in the realm needs our assistance to reassert his royal prerogative. Cold-blooded murder may well be beyond his capabilities, but why indulge in these cloak-and-dagger intrigues when you could simply dismiss Tywin Lannister as Hand and replace the small council with true Targaryen loyalists?
Does Aerys possess the authority to dismiss Tywin and his council? Certainly. Would it please him to do so? Undoubtedly. But power alone counts for little unless if one lacks the requisite will to wield it, my friend. And the only thing our king fears more than Tywin Lannister is the prospect of just how precipitously his realm would come apart at the seams without him.
And Lord Tywin?
For Tywin, the reverse holds true. Gladly would he dispense with the inconvenience of operating under the king's nominal authority, were it not for the unpalatable yet inescapable fact that as Hand, his power to operate depends entirely upon the same authority. Neither can make overt move against the other without upsetting the terms of the finely balanced equilibrium that sustains them. In short, both are too powerless to move, too powerful to move against. And so it devolves to men like the Masters and I to serve as their proxies, chipping away at one pillar or the other without ever carving too deeply, lest the ceiling come crashing down upon all of our heads.
A curious sort of friendship, that. I hope you and I never grow so close.
There is undoubtedly a bond there still, a queer interdependence entirely apart from the commands of court, though I think to name Aerys and Tywin friends rather stretches the bounds of poetic license at this point.
And yet, here you are, summoned by Aerys to sever that bond and humble his overproud Hand. Is it known at court just what precisely brought them to this present point of mutual acrimony?
On that question, the lords and ladies of court remain in near constant discussion, though to little agreement. Some will blame Aerys for lacking the aptitude for rule, while others will point the finger at Tywin for never permitting him the opportunity to learn. The first man will praise Tywin's diligence and mock Aerys' complacency. The second will celebrate Aerys for his latitude and castigate Tywin for his ambition. Many cite Aerys' refusal of Tywin's offer of his daughter for Prince Rhaegar as the moment the breach began, while others insist that was only the breaking point of a relationship that had been fracturing for years. I've heard whispers of insults given by Aerys against Tywin's late wife Joanna, and of great public projects of the king's thwarted by Tywin's parsimonious control of the royal purse. For all the claims and conjectures, however, only Aerys and Tywin know for certain the truth of their estrangement.
Illyrio strokes his chins, deep in thought.
But if Tywin is truly in command of the Seven Kingdoms, why suffer the pretense of ruling through council? Why go to the trouble of packing his table with these false lords?
When the rations were halved, then halved again, the people cursed Lord Chelsted's crumbs. When the go-cloaks took to seizing any man that so much as glanced in their direction, the people blamed Lord Staunton's heavy hand. The king's lickspittle lords is how the common folk refer to the small council, each one an agent of Aerys's, frustrating Lord Tywin's masterful governance at every turn.
Despite the fact that they all received their appointment from Tywin and march obediently in time to the tune of his own devising.
It's a wonderful arrangement, is it not? Tywin receives all of the credit, while Aerys takes all of the blame. The Lannister coin Tywin's men have been slipping into the pockets of barkeep and fishwives for years only compounds the credulity with which the small folk accept whatever narrative Tywin cares to spread. The whispers regarding Aerys Targaryen's deteriorating faculties that have so animated King's Landing of late all trace back to wagging tongues in Tywin Lannister's employ.
They do say every slander sprouts from a kernel of truth. Does Aerys strike you as man of hale heart and healthy mind?
I've yet to see him streaking naked through the throne room, or whatever other eccentricities the more imaginative among the city's rumour-mongers may have conjured.
Madness can take many forms, my friend, and among Targaryens it's typically speckled, like blight across the trunk of the family tree.
Aerys is undoubtedly a man compromised by his own paranoia. His bitterness and jealousy is all-consuming as the insecurities and self-doubt from which they were born. But mad? If madmen were capable of spinning schemes such as Aerys does, fish would fly and trawlers' nets would overflow with seagulls.
The qualities you cite seem to me prerequisites for rule. If such failings are not preeminent in princehood, they inevitably come to the fore in kingship. The crucible of court has a tendency to melt away whatever softer qualities to which a man might still somehow adhere on the day he comes into his crown.
Illyrio ponders the wisdom of his own words for a moment, but finds himself distracted. He scowls at Varys and waves a hand at the empty chair set before the desk.
Are you going to sit down at some point, or do you intend for me to use you to hang my cloaks upon?
Illyrio watches with amusement as Varys conjures a handkerchief from the folds of his robe and fashions the fabric into a makeshift glove with which to grip the chair and pull it back from the desk. He lays the handkerchief out on the seat of the chair, adjusts its position to his satisfaction once, then again, then finally lowers himself down slowly.
When you're quite ready...
The mind positively sweats at the thought of what this furniture might have seen, or been made accomplice to.
There were days in our youth when you and I would have looked upon this place as a veritable palace. It's warm, it has a roof to keep the rain out, and now our friend Ardrew has departed it's entirely free of vermin.
Yes, well, as you said, we've come a long way since those days.
In point of fact, I said you have come a long way. I may have left the poverty of my youth far behind me, but relative to how much farther I intend to go, I've barely reached beyond the garden path.
And do you intend to share these grand ambitions with your old friend and partner?
In time. Better you keep the scope of your endeavours focused on our dear Lord of Lannister and these lick-spittles of the small council. King Aerys did not go to all the effort and expense of calling you across the narrow sea without good purpose, and it's in both our interests that he sees a return upon his investment.
Speaking of investments, I shall need my reserves replenished before too long.
You've been bedding and boarding at the Red Keep for 8 months. How can you possibly have spent so much?
Although I left you 8 months ago, I have only been at court a little over 3. The first 5 I spent touring the realm, visiting every house of note throughout the 7 kingdoms, or more exactly, the towns and villages built within their shadows.
Well, I'm glad to hear my coin has been put to good use. I trust you ate well, slept in only the finest of hostelries.
This was no mere sightseeing tour, I can assure you. King's Landing may be the heart of Westeros, but the other organs are no less vital to the body politic. Although the ice and snow made every journey twice as long and thrice as laborious as the same routes in spring, by the day I turned my mount towards the capital, I had eyes and ears placed in almost every great house in Westeros.
Standing sentry upon the battlements of Storm's End, a young guardsman in the employ of House Baratheon watches the small company of riders approaching down the snaking King's Road. Straining his squinting eyes, he is just about able to discern the twin standards of stag and direwolf cracking in the icy coastal winds. With a quick, furtive glance along the ramparts, he slips quietly away in the direction of the Maester's rookery. At the procession's head, Robert and Ned sit hunched forward in their saddles, their cloaks drawn up against the biting coastal winds. As they come in sight of the castle gates, Robert breaks away from the others and steers his mount towards the cliff edge. Ned holds up a hand to stop the train, then trots his horse to Robert's side.
Bloody fool.
Robert?
Robert looks up, as though surprised at Ned's presence. He shakes his head.
I thought there'd be something. Signs of the wreck, maybe.
It's been days. Even riding as hard as we have.
Do you think the boy... Do you think Renly saw anything?
It was late. Well past dark. Even if he'd been awake, even if he'd been looking for it, can't imagine he would have seen their ship.
Robert gives a slight nod. Comforted but not convinced by his friend's assurances, he sighs and turns away from the bay.
I need some wine in my belly before I face this.
It's hardly the time, Robert.
I don't think I've ever known a better time. Come, keep me company in my cups.
You shouldn't keep your brother waiting.
We made good time on the road. They won't be expecting us for hours yet.
Ned turns to consider the dozen men at their backs, awaiting the order to continue their grim procession. When he turns back, he discovers Robert already riding away.
Robert!
You'll be fine, Ned. You and Stannis are both dour cunts. You'll have more in common than he and I ever have.
Almost every great house, but not all.
There was a time when every castle in Westeros would have high-born hostages serving as cupbearers and squires, sons and daughters held against their father's continued fealty. How easily they might have been induced to inform against their captors, however benevolent the captivity. But alas, after 20 years of peace, I found every other hall filled with naught but sons and heirs to bannermen and brothers, and simple treachery in sadly short supply. I feared that the North would prove especially inhospitable to infiltration, its people being notoriously loyal to the Starks of Winterfell.
I don't expect you're missing too much. It's not as though anything above the neck truly matters.
I wonder, is that your opinion, or your harrowing policy?
Illyrio smiles good-naturedly and raises his glass in acknowledgment of his friend's riposte.
As it was, the winter snows prevented my travelling any farther than the Twins. Now spring is almost here, I mean to dispatch a veritable flock of little birds migrating northward. But for the meanwhile the kingdom of the Wolf remains as distant and inscrutable as the noble Lord Stark himself.
Rickard and Brandon sit before the fireplace with cups of wine. Across from them sits Hoster Tully, Lord of Riverrun. Despite being of an age with Rickard, Hoster carries his years with little of his friend's salt and pepper ruggedness. His hair is almost entirely greyed, his hairline far retreated, his fleshy face and portly middle testimony to a dietary dissipation and lordly idleness in later life. Maester Wallace and Maester Kim, graduates of the Citadel, bound to Winterfell and Riverrun respectively, stand apart from their lords, conferring together in whispers.
You wanted to see me, Father?
Come in, Lyanna.
Lord Hoster, how nice to see you back at Winterfell so soon.
Lyanna half bows in curtsy. Hoster rises and kisses the back of her hand.
Catelyn and Lysa regret they could not come with me on this occasion, but they send their warmest regards nonetheless.
Please carry my own home with you. I only wish our two families didn't live so far apart, that we all might spend more time in each other's company.
And here I thought my days of granting the wishes of beautiful young maidens were over and done, though I suppose I'd best leave the honours to your brother.
They turn to Brandon expectantly. He sets his cup aside and rises.
Lady Catelyn and I are to be wed, sister.
Oh, Bran, that's wonderful news!
Lyanna skips across the room and throws her arms about her brother. Hoster beams at Rickard, though the Lord of Winterfell's own manner remains curiously subdued.
Congratulations to you also, Lord Hoster.
I cannot say I shan't mourn my little cat's absence, but I have no doubt she will make herself a good home here at Winterfell. I imagine you will welcome the opportunity to sew and dance and gossip and do all the things sisters do together after so many years surrounded by naught but beastly boys. For a time, at least.
For a time? Am I going somewhere?
Rickard shifts in his seat, glancing at Brandon. Lyanna follows his gaze, her face slowly falling into a cast of wary unease at what she finds in her brother's expression.
This wasn't actually the news I summoned you to hear, Lyanna. There's something else we must discuss.
Oh?
I am recently returned from the Eyrie, child. Don Aaron and I go back almost as far as your father and I.
Did you see Ned? Did he look well? We swapped letters, but I worry about him still.
He said very much the same about you. I can assure you, he is quite well. and the separation from his family aside, he seems to be positively thriving in the Vale.
It was at my request that Lord Tully made the journey. Mine and Lord Stefan's.
Stefan Baratheon?
Lyanna tenses like a wild animal, becoming gradually aware of the hunter's blind before which they've stumbled.
Our father is of the opinion, and Lords Arryn, Tully and Baratheon all agree, that Stefan's son Robert would prove an ideal husband for you, Lyanna.
Robert Baratheon.
Young Robert has carried something of a torch for you ever since your brother first brought him to visit, I'm told. Big, strong, strapping young man, and the absolute double of his father, but with rather a flatter stomach than Lord Stefan, I've no doubt you've noticed.
Hoster looks to Rickard to join in this ribaldry, but Rickard grants him only a cursory smile.
My daughter has always been an easy girl to love.
She shares that in common with her betrothed, then. Robert has a gift for making new friends.
That she does. She's always...
Excuse me, but she knows Robert Baratheon about as well as Hugo of the Hill, and thinks talk of her being betrothed is rather premature, given that she has not agreed to anything of the sort.
I'd have thought you'd be thrilled, my dear. Robert Baratheon will make you a fine husband. He's as tall as any man in the Seven Kingdoms, square of jaw and broad of chest. All the girls are very fond of Robert, your brother tells me.
He tells me something similar. But what else does Robert have to recommend him, beside the stature with which you're so clearly enamoured?
Lyanna, stop. Robert is heir to Storm's End. This is an ideal match for both houses.
The Baratheons are one of Westeros' most venerable families, dating all the way back to the Conquest. Oris Baratheon was half-brother to Aegon Targaryen himself, and served him faithfully as the very first hand of the king. Robert's own grandmother was daughter to another Aegon, the one they named Unlikely. Robert will be quite the powerful man one day, and enormously wealthy besides. Just imagine the beautiful jewellery he will dress you in once you're his lady.
Forgive me, Lord Hoster, but it is painfully apparent that your notion of what exactly is important to a woman fits me about as well as a pony saddle would fit an aurochs. Perhaps my family and I could discuss this matter in private?
My apologies, Hoster. It would appear my daughter is set upon embarrassing her father by forgetting her courtesies. Lord Hoster is a dear old friend and an honoured guest in our home, Lyanna, and he went to great trouble and travelled a long way on your behalf. You will apologise, immediately.
Lyanna readies herself to refuse, but meeting her father's implacable glare, she reluctantly relents and ducks her head to Hoster.
Forgive me, Lord Hoster. My father has the truth of it. I allowed my surprise to overcome my manners, and I pray you will accept my sincerest apologies for my rudeness.
Hoster puts a gentle hand on each of Lyanna's shoulders, smiling at her with avuncular indulgence.
I understand, child. I would not insult your brother here by admitting my cat was similarly emotional when I told her of our intentions. But neither will I deny she was without a few tears of her own. It's a big day in a young girl's life, with the biggest step still to come. The shock will pass, and you will come to see how wise a match your father is making for you.
Perhaps my daughter's suggestion, unlike her manners, was not entirely without merit. If you'd be so kind as to give me a moment alone with my daughter.
Of course. It's past this old man's bedtime anyhow.
Hoster turns for the door, but not before planting a quick peck on Lyanna's cheek.
My warmest congratulations, my dear. Come along, Kim.
Maester Kim nods farewell to Maester Wallace, and obediently follows at his lord's heel.
Brandon, pour me another drink. And one for your sister.
Brandon moves to the table and pours 2 cups of wine, Lyanna and Rickard eyeing one another like cocks across the fighting ring all the while. Brandon delivers the cups. Lyanna throws back the contents of hers in a single draught.
I'll leave you to hash this out between yourselves.
No, I will leave. You will talk sense to your sister. Of all the duties you will inherit when you become Lord of Winterfell, this is the one I shall miss the least.
Brandon and Lyanna each betray their surprise at their father's sudden recusal.
I will not command you to do this, Lyanna. You are my daughter, my only daughter. All the alliances with all the great houses in all the 7 kingdoms are nothing to me beside your happiness. But you're also a Stark. You have a duty to your family and your house. And in this world, our desires and our duty, all too rarely one and the same.
Rickard departs. Without needing to be summoned, Maester Wallace takes his cue, pausing only to bow briefly to Lyanna.
I have no doubt you shall make your father proud, my lady. I only wish your dear mother could be here to share in this blessed occasion.
Once the Stark siblings are alone, Lyanna pours herself another drink.
Why are men always at their most poetic when asking a woman to do something she has no interest in doing?
Father is not asking anything of you. He didn't go through himself or mother.
It's not the same for a man. You don't have to suffer the indignity of being traded away like a fattened cow at market. Did you know about this?
I did.
For how long?
The same day father proposed I marry the Tully girl.
And you didn't care to tell me? The way gossip travels around the 7 kingdoms, I'm probably the last person to know about my own engagement.
Actually, father and Lord Hoster have been very careful about keeping these matches from becoming public knowledge. At least, until they are official. Something to do with saving face, I imagine, should their plans encounter any...
Brandon's tongue freezes in his mouth at his sister's death stare, his mind scrabbling for the word least likely to provoke Lyanna's anger to even greater heights.
Complications?
I've been called worse. But you'll have to forgive me if father's face is not at the forefront of my concerns right now.
You were jumping for joy a moment ago when you heard I was to be wed.
That's different. You're heir to Winterfell. You have to marry. All your life you've known this day was coming.
As of you, however much you may have pretended otherwise. Did you really imagine father would, what, allow you to wander the 7 kingdoms seeking adventure as a hedge knight? Sail for the free cities and make a living selling your sword?
I imagined he knew me better than this.
Lyanna drains her cup and immediately serves herself another.
I suppose this puts an end to your conquest of that awful Dustin girl.
We're not leaving for Riverrun just yet, and Barbary has always appreciated my poetics.
Lyanna scowls at her brother's caddishness. Brandon takes a step and hijacks his sister's cup on its way to her lips, withholding it beyond her protesting reach.
Father won't be around forever, Lyanna. He wants to know that when he's gone, you'll be taken care of, that you'll be safe, whatever comes.
I have 3 brothers to keep me safe.
I know you're making a joke of it, but no, we won't always be here either. We'll have families of our own to worry over. Even Benjen soon enough. And we can't care for you the way a husband can. Robert Baratheon is a decent man, handsome and wealthy, heir to a powerful...
Lyanna rolls her eyes in exasperation so hard they're like to escape her head entirely. Brandon realises his misstep and throws up his hands placatingly.
All right. I know you don't think those things are important, so let me put this to you instead. Ned thinks of Robert as a brother, and he was willing to have Lord Hoster pass his blessings on to father. Have you ever known our brother to act rashly? To commit himself without first thoroughly weighing both sides of the matter? You and I are the wild ones. If Ned follows a course of action, you know as well as I that he thought long and hard and settled his mind that it's the right choice.
Brandon watches Lyanna for clues to her thoughts as she moves to the fire and sits, chewing her bottom lip and studying the reds and yellows dancing atop the blackened logs.
I'm going to kill our little brother.
Ned only wants what's best for you. That's all any of us want.
Lyanna slumps back in the chair and slides down the leather until her chin meets her chest.
And what about what I want?
Here at home, I had my little birds busy about the castle from morning to night, cloaked in the anonymity of their station. Just the other day, in fact, My man in the kitchen swept up a clutch of hatchlings bound for Prince Rhaegar's household and delivered them to my door.
And when you need eyes and ears in sanctums into which mere servants may not trespass?
It's commonly known that Maegor the Cruel had the masons that erected the Red Keep slaughtered as soon as their work was done, to keep the secrets of its architecture only for himself. When Maegor died, he carried the castle's mysteries to the grave, save for a scant few intimates, and in time rumours of hidden passageways and underground tunnels turned to legend, and legend into myth.
Yet somehow you have disinterred Maegor's secrets.
For all its finery and grandeur, the Red Keep is positively riddled with rats. It seems no catcher had been permitted within the walls since the earliest days of the dance, Queen Alicent having issued the edict for entirely understandable reasons. In my first days at court, I paid particular attention to the infestation and noticed the rats had an uncanny ability to appear and disappear as though by magic. There one moment, with no evident means of ingress, yet somehow escaped in the next. With the hand's consent, I hunted down the finest rat-catcher in all King's Landing and charged him with solving the riddle of the vermin's passage.
To great success, I can only assume.
Oh, indeed. There must be 10 leagues of tunnels hidden behind the walls of the Red Keep. Every time I believe I have walked them all, I discover some new hidden door or hatchway that reveals corners of the castle I didn't even know existed.
Illyrio stands, grinning broadly.
Why are you smiling like that?
Truly, great minds do think alike.
Illyrio leads Varys through to the adjoining bedchamber, stopping before a floor-length mirror affixed to the wall. Varys looks sour-faced at his reflection.
Is this a riddle of some kind? Perhaps the answer to all my questions lay within me all along?
Illyrio hooks his fingers around the mirror's frame and pulls it towards him, revealing a narrow passageway beyond. Without a word of explanation, Illyrio walks into the darkness, and a perplexed Varys follows after him. Illyrio holds a finger to his lips to caution his friend against speaking. Every few steps he points Varys's attention to a pair of tiny eye-holes bored into the walls. When they reach the end of the passage, Illyrio invites Varys to bow his head and inspect the final set of eye-holes. The eunuch does as he's bid, and peers through the wall into one of the brothel's dank, sparsely furnished bedchambers.
There's another passageway below us, accessed through the back of the drinks cabinet in the parlour.
Who said that?
It's all right, Nerissa. It's only me.
Oh, hello, Magister. I must say, I don't think much of these accommodations.
Have no fear, sweetling. We'll have the place looking fit for a king soon enough.
Despite the darkness, Varys is almost certain he sees the Magister wink.
If not a king, then a lord at very least. Or if the gods are good, even a master of the small council.
And you accuse me of a sordid mind.
I know this is a subject about which you're possessed of scant experience, so trust me when I say that men's tongues are never more exercised than the moments just after they have taken their pleasure. I've heard it said that come the end of the night, a working girl's ears are often her sorest parts.
Not by any working girls, you haven't.
Forgive the turn of phrase, my dear, but you must concede my point. In all the world, who is more privy to a man's secrets than the woman with whom he shares the pillow?
Grandmaester Pycelle ambles at leisure towards his quarters in the Red Keep, fingering idly at the links of various metals he wears in a chain about his neck. Stepping inside, the old man is startled to discover Prince Rhaegar sitting patiently in the window seat, awaiting his return.
Your Grace?
I trust you don't mind my letting myself in.
Oh, you may come and go as you wish, Your Grace. The Red Keep is your home after all. May I sit?
Please do, though I shan't be staying long. This is a sensitive issue, and I assure you I feel no small discomfort coming to you without my wife's knowledge. I know I can trust in your discretion, Grandmaester,
Pycelle's eyes sparkle at the imminent prospect of intrigue, but he does his best to preserve his air of professional detachment.
Oh, you honour me with your confidence, Your Grace. How may I be of service?
Rhaegar stands and turns his gaze to the window for a moment, choosing his words carefully.
I understand Elia has already shared with you her feelings on our predicament.
Her Grace is much too governed by the proprieties befitting a lady of her birth and breeding to discuss such things explicitly. But there is little a man of my experience cannot readily infer. It pains me greatly to see the poor child's heart drop each time I conclude my examination and counsel continued restraint.
So there is no doubt as to the danger. Elia would have me believe there's reason to be hopeful.
Your Grace, it is not my place to refute the word of a princess.
Nor deny a prince a straightforward answer to a straightforward question. I'm asking for your medical opinion.
Pycelle hesitates, clearly reluctant. He sighs and sits forward, interlocking his hands upon his desk.
If only her body were as durable as her spirit, I have no doubt her Grace could summon the strength to birth a litter of royal children. But simply wishing as much will never make it so. The princess has never been a well woman, Your Grace, and each successive labour only makes more precarious her congenitally delicate constitution.
So the prognosis is plain. She cannot have another child.
Even if her Grace were able to carry to term this time, the likelihood of her surviving the birth is extremely slight indeed.
If she were to return to Dawn?
A more temperate climate could well aid in her recovery, but warm weather can only do so much, Your Grace. It cannot undo the damage that has already been done.
Rhaegar holds the Grandmaester's eye for a long moment, running a hand across his stubbled jawline.
Thank you for your candour, Grandmaester.
It is my duty to serve, Your Grace, even when I take no pleasure in it.
Rhaegar turns to leave. With one hand on the door, he stops, turns back to Pycelle.
This conversation is to go no further than this room. This will be hard enough for Elia. I will not have court gossip made of her misery.
Well, of course, Your Grace, I would rather leap from atop this very tower than betray your faith in my discretion.
Rhaegar nods, then hesitates, clearly weighing his parting words heavily.
Be gentle with our hopes, Grandmaester. Even the most durable spirit has a point at which it breaks.
So, the wandering prince has returned. But from where?
The Free Cities, I believe, though where exactly and for what purpose remains as shrouded in mystery as each of his previous excursions. Rhaegar has spent the better part of the last 5 years wandering the world, only returning home long enough to plant another baby in Princess Elia's belly.
But this time he lingers.
As I understand it, Rhaegar was not so much summoned by his father as he was conscripted. Aerys has made it plain he expects Rhaegar to serve in this campaign against Tywin and his lickspittles, with the small council serving as the front lines.
The old lion has grown comfortable at the head of the table these last 20 years. I cannot imagine he will prove overly enthused at having to surrender that seat to Dragonseed.
Varys raises his eyebrows in circumspection.
You disagree?
While I've little doubt that Tywin will chafe at Rhaegar's presence in council, I'm of the mind that the prince's return to court need not necessarily prove contrary to the interests of House Lannister, and given that Grandmaester Pycelle most assuredly shared with his master the news that Elia cannot bear her husband another child, I expect our Lord Hand has concluded very much the same, which may well explain why his daughter Cersei was suddenly called to court.
Well now, that certainly puts the cat among the pigeons, if you'll permit the cliché.
In this instance, I will not. Pigeons at least have the good sense to scatter at the first sight of cats. Here, only last night, that arrival was feted with wine and canapes.
The great hall of the Red Keep hums with the high spirits of the city's nobility. Resplendent in their finest silks and satins, the lords and ladies of King's Landing chat in groups over arbor gold and Dornish red and all manner of sweet and savoury treats circulated by the castle's servants. Among the crowd, Jaime and Cersei Lannister politely receive a steady stream of well-wishers. The eyes of every lady linger upon Jaime, every lord's appraising Cersei appreciatively. Jaime leans over to whisper excitedly into his sister's ear.
Cersei, look! It's the Sword of the Morning.
Oh?
Cersei turns to follow Jaime's gaze.
Don't look!
You just told me to look. Which one is he?
What do you mean, which one is he? Isn't it obvious? The one with Dawn strapped across his back.
That doesn't sound terribly comfortable for Dawn. Which one is she, then?
Dawn is his sword.
I thought you said his sword was called Morning.
Sword of the Morning is his name, not his sword's. Well, his title, actually.
So it's Sir Sword, Lord Morning.
Oh, how many times have you heard me talk about this?
About Sir Arthur Dane, the finest swordsman in all the world, and the first to carry the Sword of the Morning honorific since the reign of King Daeron II? Or about his sword Dawn, forged from the heart of a fallen star bestowed upon only those sons of Starfall deemed warrior enough to bear sword and title both?
You were teasing me.
You may have told me the tale once or twice over the years, now I think back.
Should I go over there? No, I can't just walk up and start talking at him. I don't want to seem too presumptuous.
Jaime, he's at a banquet in our honour. I hardly think he'd find you introducing yourself too great a presumption.
So you think I should go and talk to him? I should go talk to him. I'm going to talk to him.
Jaime slips away, leaving Cersei alone to nod and smile each time she catches another man's lingering study, drawing blushes from the men and possessive scowls from their women. Entering unheralded through a side door, Tywin makes his way across the room towards his daughter, never doubting that the crowd will part before him to accommodate his imperious stride.
Father?
Tywin casts a critical eye after his son, trying and failing to surreptitiously stalk his hero.
It appears your brother is enjoying himself.
You did invite him?
We both know it was you I called to court. As long as your brother stays out of trouble, he can occupy himself however he pleases.
Tywin looks Cersei over, clearly reaching a rather less appreciative conclusion than the rest of the men in attendance.
I thought we agreed you would wear the gown I had made for you.
I've never cared for green, it's simply not my colour.
A girl may dress for their own pleasure, Cersei. A woman may not. Come, you can change after supper.
Cersei takes her father's arm and lets herself be led to where the crowd is thickest, Tywin speaking only loud enough for his daughter's hearing.
Princess Elia will not be accompanying her husband this evening. Still too weak to endure sitting down to dinner, it seems.
How disappointing. I was so looking forward to introducing myself.
I will see that you are seated next to the prince. You will have him entirely to yourself for the evening. I expect you to make good use of the opportunity.
Arriving at a densely packed ring of dignitaries, Tywin pointedly clears his throat and nods in perfunctory graciousness as the bodies obediently shuffle aside.
Your Grace.
Ah, my Lord Hand.
Cersei's eyes grow wide, shining with admiration at the sight of Queen Rhaella Targaryen, a gown of red and black silk hugging the contours of her lean, lissom body, her shoulders and arms bare but for a layer of the most delicate Myrish lace. While the first signs of middle age may have dimmed the Queen's natural radiance, the wrinkles about her eyes and hint of white among the silver hair fixed in a roped braid about the crown of her head confer upon her an undeniable air of stately grace. Tywin bows.
If it please your Grace, I would like to formally introduce my daughter, Cersei Lannister of Casterly Rock.
Cersei curtsies low before the Queen. Rhaella takes Cersei's hands and looks her over, shaking her head in silent wonderment.
Gods, look how you've grown! And Mother's Mercy's so beautiful, the very picture of our dear Joanna.
Despite being no stranger to compliments upon her comeliness, Cersei blushes beneath Rhaella's affection.
You're too kind, Your Grace.
It's just wonderful your father finally called you to court. I can't tell you how many times I've asked it of him. I was almost ready to make it a royal command.
You flatter me, Your Grace.
I'll have none of that. You shall call me Rhaella, and I shall call you Cersei. Do you hear me? I just know we shall be the very best of friends, just as your dear mother and I once were.
Cersei positively glows at this. The Queen's warmth radiating, her ebullience infectious, her charm impossible to resist.
Now, what has your father told you about the old days at court?
Cersei hesitates, surprised at the question.
Only that my mother was in your service until she and my father married.
Rhaella frowns and bats at Tywin's arm in mock reprimand.
You do your daughter a disservice, Tywin. Every girl should know her mother.
As you say, Your Grace.
If Rhaella registers the rote compliance in Tywin's tone, she gives no sign. She leans closer to Cersei, speaking in the intimate whisper of co-conspirators.
You and I will find some time to talk away from all these ghastly men, just the two of us. I will tell you about the side of Joanna your father never saw, all the wicked little secrets women share when they are alone.
I would like that very much, Your Rhaella.
Better, much better. Now you're mine, it's only proper I be allowed to show you off.
Leading Cersei with one hand and fluttering the air with the other to shoo aside her guests, Rhaella forges a path for them both, Tywin following behind in their wake.
Allow me to introduce my son, Prince Rhaegar Targaryen.
At the sound of his mother's voice, Rhaegar breaks off his conversation and turns dutifully about. Cersei cannot prevent a small gasp from escaping her lips in the first moment Rhaegar sets his eyes upon her. Transfixed before his twin storms of whirling indigo, she clutches tighter to Rhaella's hand, like a squall-racked sailor clinging to the mast. On unsteady legs she dips once more, her skin afire at the touch of Rhaegar's lips, as he returns the courtesy with a kiss to the back of her outstretched hand.
I heard rumours all morning of a beautiful woman arriving at the hour of the wolf. Half the guards imagined they saw the ghost of Shiera Seastar return to humble those ladies yet living.
Taking note of his daughter's uncharacteristic timidity, Tywin steps forward to spur events along.
Your Grace, I believe it's almost time to announce supper. May I escort you to the stairs?
Is it that time already? Thank the gods we have you to keep the wheels greased around here, Tywin. Do lead on.
Rhaella winds her arm through Tywin's, and the two depart, leaving Cersei and Rhaegar entirely alone in a crowded hall. As he passes, Tywin places a hand in the small of Cersei's back and gives her a gentle push of encouragement towards the prince. Resplendent in their gleaming whites, Sir Arthur Dane and Sir Barristan Selmy stand apart from the general revelry, passing the evening in idle conversation over cups of watered-down wine. Jaime hovers anxiously just beyond their notice, straightening his crimson doublet and running his hands through his hair like a nervous suitor at his beloved's door.
Sir Arthur?
The King's Guard turn, Jaime's nerves immediately settling somewhat at the easy smile with which Arthur greets him.
Well, if it isn't the young Lord of Lannister.
Barristan gives a half-bow, his manner every bit as genial as Arthur's.
The man of the hour indeed. Welcome to King's Landing, my lord.
Thank you, sir. And you, Sir Barristan. I noticed you from across the room. It's a true honour to meet you both.
The White Cloaks do give the game away somewhat.
The Lord Commander insists on his standards, even for the off-duty.
Oh, lurking by the buffet table was so much easier before I took my vows.
I recognised your faces, actually. I saw you fight in the melee at the crag 2 years past, and Sir Arthur when he led a detachment of Targaryen soldiers to the Westerlands in pursuit of the Black Hand brigands.
You should have made yourself known. We were 10 days hard riding after the Black Hand, and my men would have welcomed a break to visit with a son of the Rock.
If only I could. My father did not allow Cersei or I to mix among the small folk, so I wore a hooded cloak and joined the back of the crowds gathered to watch you pass.
A popular practice, it seems.
Arthur grins at Barristan's muttered aside.
Do you ride, Jaime? Train with the sword?
Yes, Sir Arthur, every day. I'm undefeated in the tilts, actually, and our master-at-arms say I remind him of Sir Barristan in his youth.
You must have an especially long memory, then.
And who is your master-at-arms, may I ask?
Sir Mathos Hunt.
Ah. Well, in that case, we shall have to keep a close eye on this one, Arthur. Hunt knows a swordsman when he sees one. Except perhaps when he's been in his cups. I seem to recall he lost a bag of silver betting against you at Maidenpool after a night celebrating his brother's betrothal.
Not his finest moment, but a good man otherwise. I actually learned a good deal of my swordsmanship alongside Sir Mathos. We spent hours sparring together in the days before our knighthoods.
Yes, I know. That's why I had my father hire him as my instructor.
Jaime silently curses himself as his earnestness draws an awkward silence from the knights.
Will you be entering the lists at Harrenhal, Jaime?
That's certainly my intention. I look forward to testing myself against a better class of competitor.
Let's hope you don't draw Sir Arthur, then.
If you truly are the younger Selmy come again, I'll have to make a point of watching your tilts. I've always wondered how the old man would fare if he didn't move so slowly.
Slower than you is still faster than most.
I'm certain I couldn't help but improve should you be kind enough to provide me your advice. Doubly so should I find my mettle tested against either of you in the lists.
I'll do you one better. Unhorse Barristan here, and I'll give you a week of private lessons. How does that sound?
Well, don't give the boy any more reason to knock me on my backside. Defeating a Kingsguard in his first big tourney should be incentive enough, don't you think?
That would be, yes, of course, absolutely.
His attention suddenly distracted by something across the hall, Arthur hands Barristan his cup.
You'll have to forgive me, Jaime, but even off-duty a Kingsguard must keep his obligations. Again, welcome to the capital.
You too, Sir Arthur.
Jaime flinches in embarrassment at his nonsensical reply, Barristan chuckling at the young man's blushes.
How long has it been since we last saw one another, I wonder?
7 years at least, my lady.
You must have remembered me as quite the little horror.
Not at all. I always thought of you as a charming young lady, a credit to your family and your house.
And did you often? Think of me, I mean.
Rhaegar looks rather uncomfortable at this flirtatious turn. Cersei smiles wickedly and leans close.
I have a little secret to confess. Do you promise it will stay between us?
I never betray a confidence.
I had such starry eyes for you after I met you that first time. I would boast to the other girls that I was going to grow up and make you fall in love with me, and that I would give you 12 children, all as beautiful as their father.
Endeavouring to disguise his discomfort behind the mask of courtesy, Rhaegar smiles politely, tugging gently at his left earlobe.
That's very flattering, though I hardly imagine I warranted such attention, callow youth that I was.
Cersei waves a hand dismissively.
Oh, you know how girls can be when they're infatuated with a handsome older man. It all seems so long ago now. Childhood seems like a different lifetime when you're grown.
Cersei raises her glass, batting her lashes at Rhaegar over the brim.
Once you've entered into your full womanhood.
She takes a slow sip of wine, inviting Rhaegar to dwell on the sensuousness of her pillowy pink lips. Rhaegar tugs at his earlobe once again, this time with the vigour of a novice septon ringing the morning bells.
My lady, please forgive the interruption.
Materializing like a phantom at Rhaegar's side, Arthur bows his head in apology to Cersei.
Your Grace, might I beg a moment of your time? It's a matter of some urgency, I understand.
Rhaegar conjures a beleaguered scowl for Cersei's sake.
Very well, if it's an urgent matter. Lady Cersei, if you will excuse me, I shall leave you to enjoy your evening.
Oh, I've no doubt I shall. I understand we're seated next to one another at table.
Until then.
Rhaegar allows Arthur to escort him away.
What took you so long? If I pulled on my ear any longer, I was like to rip the damn thing off entirely.
I was having my own introduction to the next generation of Lannisters, though I suspect mine was altogether less predatory.
Arthur looks back at Cersei and the circle of young lords that has already gathered about her.
You'd better watch yourself for that one. I might not be here to free you from her web next time.
Is this your first visit to the capital, Jaime?
It is, Sir Barristan. Mine and my sister's both.
How do you find it?
It's everything I heard it would be.
If your skills with a lance are as well honed as your manners, I may as well yield before we even reach Harrenhal. Well, perhaps my brothers and I could help you acclimate yourself. How would you like to spend tomorrow riding out in the company of the Kingsguard?
Really? I don't quite know what to say.
Well, I would hope you'd say yes, Sir Barristan.
Yes, Sir Barristan. Absolutely. It would be my honour.
Wonderful. We've had a spot of trouble with the Kingswood Brotherhood of late, so the Lord Commander intends for us to make our presence felt among the locals, give them a glimpse of the royal standard to set their minds at ease.
The Brotherhood?
Sorry bunch of scoundrels by all accounts. Thieves, thugs and broken men led by a soiled knight named Symond Toyne. A band of city watchmen went missing in the snow giving chase a couple of moons past, and then only a few days ago Lord Tyrell's cousin Victor was cut near in half by some beast of Toyne's that the small folk call the Smiling Knight. If they'd held themselves to rustling the odd horse and robbing the occasional purse, they'd likely have lasted until the spring before Lord Tywin passed them across the Lord Commander's desk. Once you start swinging steel at the highborn, though...
Barristan trails off, and in so doing recognises the excited glint in Jaime's eyes. He holds up his hands as though calming a young colt bucking in its corral.
Don't go getting your hopes up, lad. I wouldn't be extending the invitation if I expected anything other than a pleasant afternoon taking in the scenery. The Brotherhood are scavengers. They have no belly for a fight. They'll flee back to their bolt holes the second they hear us coming.
A hush descends as Tywin and Rhaella climb the steps leading to the banquet hall and turn to address the crowd.
My lords and ladies, unfortunately my husband the king is currently indisposed with matters of the realm that demand his immediate attention, and so it falls to me to thank you all for your attendance tonight and for joining my family in welcoming to the capital the children of our dear hand, Lord Tywin Lannister. Cersei, Jaime, I bid you welcome.
Rhaella raises her glass and the hall follows suit. From amid her throng of admirers, Cersei raises her own in acknowledgement. Barristan hastily hands Jaime one of his cups so that he might join the toast.
You are all invited to join us in the banquet hall, where we will break bread together and feast in honour of the newest and fairest members of this great court.
As the revellers begin shuffling up the steps, Jaime and Cersei move among the crowd like torches of golden fire, all about them attracted closer by the beauty and vitality of their flames, while in the shadows at the chamber's farthest threshold, a spectral figure lurks unseen. Aerys Targaryen watches the children of the rock with a ruminative eye.
From everything I have seen thus far, it's clear to me that the boy possesses neither the interest nor the acumen to play at his father's games, whatever hopes Lord Tywin may publicly profess to the contrary. He preens, he struts, he parrots the proper courtesies, but there's very little of substance behind the handsome veneer. He rather reminds me of a similarly dashing young swordsman I once knew.
If only I'd had his father's coin.
While he still merits half a mind of interest simply by virtue of his being Tywin's eldest son and heir, I feel confident in saying we can safely set Jaime aside. The daughter, however...
You suspect she was the true purpose of her father's summons?
Any suspicions I may have harboured were, if you'll pardon the turn of phrase, put to bed when I watched her beside him at the banquet. She ate very little, her stomach no doubt full from all but devouring Prince Rhaegar braids to boots.
Have you spoken to the king of the girl's intentions?
I have not, nor shall I unless he inquires outright. Aerys is especially mercurial when it comes to his son, and I will not have him sticking his royal fingers in the pie before it is finished cooking.
An edifying image indeed,
said the flesh peddler to the eunuch.
Illyrio turns down the corners of his mouth in concession to Varys's fair comment.
Heed my warning, Illyrio. The girl is Alicent Hightower come again. The young and beautiful daughter of the Hand strategically slipped into the scene at the precise moment a bereaved Targaryen brow most needs a bosom to grieve upon.
Rhaegar is not a widower just yet, my friend. The man of privilege that refrains from indulging his baser desires is a rare thing in this world, but if Tywin Lannister believes Rhaegar will set aside Elia Martell for lust alone, perhaps he's not the master strategist we were cautioned to expect.
A woman need not be deceased to be departed. I've seen neither hide nor hair of Princess Elia since I arrived. I heard her screams, though. A day and a night that poor child laboured to deliver her stillborn son. For all we know, the girl could have quietly gone the way of King Viserys on the eve of the dance, slowly rotting away in her bed while the court conspires around her.
I'm glad to see those histories I insisted you read have left an impression. I admit I was hesitant in recommending them at first, lest you learned what a cankerous pustule on the rump of civilization these 7 kingdoms have always been, and refused your commission.
It's always confounded me how a man as experienced of the world as yourself can still be possessed of such petty bigotries.
There's nothing petty about my distaste for the uncivilized, and grand bigotries are the flames that fuel the world, my friend. The rich abhor the poor, the strong despise the weak, and upon the axis of these antagonisms, the wheel of history perpetually turns.
Until the fires should rage too hot and the wheel burn away to cinders, of course.
More fool the craftsman that builds his wheel of a combustible material.
Illyrio stands and steps to the window. Clasping his hands behind his back, he raises his gaze from the squalid little square below to the indomitable grandeur of the Red Keep perched atop Aegon's high hill, the tips of its tallest towers lost in the low-hanging canopy of clouds.
Do you know, I often find myself imagining what would become of this country if one dark, moonless night every lord and lady in the 7 kingdoms were carried away unnoticed to some place far away, never to be seen again. How long would it be before anyone noticed, do you think? The people would still plant and harvest, elsewise they would starve. The artisans would still make and repair, elsewise they would soon have neither wares nor labours left to sell. The bureaucrats, the law-keepers, the money managers, all of them going about their work as though nothing were any different than the day before. Because that's how the system was designed. The men of history responsible for its implementation always meant for their contrivance to one day run under its own momentum, so they themselves might never dirty their high-born hands again, and could better spend their days at leisure, eating and hawking and drinking, and dancing away the wealth that flows up to them through the many strata of their great and glorious creation. If uncivilized is not the most apposite word for such an arrangement, I should dearly love to hear it better.
Well, this is an unexpected turn, I must say. In all the years of our friendship, I've never known you to be a champion of the common folk.
And I've never known you to be such a poor listener. I'm a champion of enterprise, Varys, and that makes me an enemy of any system in which a man of ingenuity and ambition finds the heights to which he may be permitted to climb, determined entirely by the circumstance of his birth.
Illyrio turns back from the window, wagging a forefinger at Varys.
The conclusion I'm inviting you to draw from all of this is not that I wish to abolish the ruling class of Westeros, but that I wish Westeros to have a better class of ruler.
The Magister returns to his chair. He leans forward and runs a palm over the smoothly planed wood of the desktop.
Here in Westeros, their wheel is crafted of the finest grain of wood, sourced only from family trees of the deepest and most durable of roots, an entire society built upon the gnarled and twisted branches of inherited privilege. In the more savage corners of the world, they cast their wheel from steel. Any man may crown himself a king, however humble his beginnings. All he need possess is the courage to face down his enemies, the skill to slay them, and the boldness to climb the mountain of their corpses and claim his throne. But in the free cities, in the free cities you need neither an ancient name nor a fearsome reputation. We have our princes and our triarchs, to be sure, but only with the forbearance of we magisters. It's the Council of Merchants that truly hold the power, because in the free cities, the wheel upon which our lives turn is made of purest gold. Not wood, not steel, only gold.
You speak so fondly of the free cities. It's a wonder you ever left.
When Illyrio does not take the invitation to explain himself, Varys tilts his head and studies him closely.
Tell me plainly, Illyrio. Why did you come here?
The Magister leans back in his chair and interlocks his hands across his belly, the corners of his mouth forging trails of ascent through the loose pink flesh of his jowly face.
I'd have thought that was plain enough by now, old friend. I came to Westeros to reinvent the wheel.
The preceding podcast was entirely a work of fanfiction. It was unofficial, unaffiliated, and unauthorised. Neither the podcast, nor any individual involved in its production, is now, nor has ever been, in any way associated with HBO, Game of Thrones, George R.R. Martin, or the Song of Ice and Fire book series. The podcast was, is now, and shall always be, entirely without profit. Neither the podcast directly, nor its makers indirectly, generate or receive any form of revenue or financial restitution that might otherwise accrue to the rightful copyright holders. The preceding podcast was entirely a work of fan fiction. We hope you enjoyed it.